a little lag on live stream.
Yep, and the live stream is ready to go, so.
We're good.
All right, well, let me call this meeting to order. Welcome to the May 10th, 2021 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We are pleased you're all able to join us with us this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the clerk or the assistant city manager who will read the required notice. Ms. Heath or Ms. Mester?
Yes, I'll just making sure we have our live stream going. Yes, I have a notice to read. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of City Council will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/council meetings and on Falls Church cable television channels Cox 11, RCN 2, and Verizon 35. Public comments will be accepted virtually from those who have signed up to speak via the video platform. If anybody wishes to send any comments to City Council via email, they can send them to cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. And will you please call roll?
Yes, I will. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Here.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
All right. Well, again, welcome to all. We're going to go next move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask wherever you might be to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you. And so our first order of business on a busy day is to hear from Claire Weatherly. And so we are delighted to have you with us. You are the regional winner of the Virginia Municipal League's If I Were Mayor essay contest. And you've also, I believe, been before us several years ago talking about a crosswalk issue, to my recollection. And so you have done a great job, I think, advocating for your neighborhood and your community, and did a fantastic job on your essay. So we want to congratulate you on that and give you an opportunity, if you'd like, to say anything you want to us. You got our ear. So welcome and congratulations, Ms. Weatherly.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. As we all know, the 2021 school year has been different than normal due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I've had a lot of experience with virtual learning and have discovered numerous things that have and haven't worked. As mayor, I would implement solutions and ask you to do some simple things that would make it easier for your students and children to thrive during virtual learning. Establishing a routine similar to what I would do in normal times helps improve my focus, organization, and makes me ready for the day. There are also things that I have found don't work well but are easy to find a solution for. One such thing is needing to follow exercise videos in PE. I've found that having a routine similar to what I did pre-pandemic is helpful. It helps me focus and get more things done. I make sure that I have enough time in the morning to get dressed, eat breakfast, and get ready for school. Getting dressed and not doing school from my bed is beneficial for my focus because it makes me feel more awake and ready for the day. It will help students pay attention because they will feel like they are more in school. If you don't leave your bed, then it is more likely that you aren't able to focus as well. Eating breakfast before class is also important so that I can then listen and participate during class. The final thing that kids should be sure to do daily is to write any homework or activities on a calendar or agenda. This will help them stay organized and not fall behind on any work. If I were mayor, I would ask parents to help their kids make time to get ready in the morning by reminding them to set an alarm or having things set up for school ahead of time. Parents or teachers should also make sure that students have a place to record their homework. Schools could solve this by buying agendas or adding them to the school supply list at the beginning of the year. Finally, the night before class, students could move their laptops and other supplies to where they will do class the next day. This would let them sleep in a little more because they wouldn't have to set up their workspace in the morning. Something that hasn't worked well for me as a student and athlete is only following exercise videos in PE. Following an exercise video is not very interesting for me because we do one every class and they are all somewhat similar. Always doing the same kind of exercises doesn't work well because not all exercises help for different sports. There is also no way to adapt the exercises to different skill levels. If I were mayor, I would ask teachers to solve this by planning for one day where there is an exercise video in class and one independent day for exercising. If kids could choose what they want to do for exercise, they would have more fun because they could do something they are interested in. This would also give kids a way to get off screens and go outside to get fresh air. The teachers could ask students to submit a picture of what they did so that they know students exercised during the time. As people begin returning to school in a hybrid schedule, they can still use these tips to help make the transition smoother. Having a normal routine will be beneficial to students and children because they will not have to change their routine as much when they return to school. Having a varied PE routine would also be beneficial because they will not struggle when they go back to normal PE exercises. If I were elected mayor, I would look forward to serving the Falls Church community and using my experience to make virtual learning go as smoothly as possible for students in Falls Church.
Fantastic job, Ms. Weatherly. I think you did an awesome job. And, a lot of the tips and suggestions and ideas you have, I think work for members of city council and all sorts of grown-ups. So I think you've had some fantastic ideas, and that's quite impressive. And as I said, I remembered you from a few years back when you wrote to us and advocated on behalf of, I believe, a crosswalk in your neighborhood, and you've done just a fantastic job. So I want to let you know how proud we are of you here on City Council, and thank you so much for participating. We also have someone from VML who'd like to say a few words as well, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. His name is Robert Burlington, and Mr. Burlington, are you with us?
I am here, yes.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity or moment to say a few words if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say congratulations to Claire. Doing the essay contest is a big deal for us every year, and we were really happy to have you as a winner. And I want to make sure you got the check and the certificate we sent. Did those get there okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good. And then I'll just take just a second to say that I am the Director of Communications for the Virginia Municipal League. And as somebody who spends a lot of my day rewriting things that other people write poorly, it always is good to meet somebody like you that can communicate clearly, because it gives me hope that my job will get easier one day. So thank you and congratulations.
All right, fantastic. Well, again, Ms. Weatherly, we thank you, and we hope that you'll come and join us when we get back to in-person meetings, because we'd love to have you come to council. And if you'd like, you can call the meeting to order and bang the gavel and say hello to all of us in person. But we'd be delighted to spend some time with you at council chambers when we go back in. And it looks like we have, is that a hand up we've got? Vice Mayor Connolly. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. I just want to share my congratulations for Claire and your well thought out and well written letter. I agree with Mr. Bullington that it's always nice when someone is a good writer and can express their thoughts so easily and well for other people to understand. And I'm hoping that you would share that so that it could go into the morning announcements so that other parents as well as city council members can take a look at that and learn your tips, because I was writing some of them down thinking, yeah, if I set my stuff up early in the morning at night, then I could sleep in more in the morning. So thank you for those reminders.
All right. So again, Claire, we look forward to seeing you at a city council meeting very soon, and keep writing to us and communicating to us and stay involved in your community as you have been, and you're setting a great example. So very proud of you. We look forward to seeing you in person real soon. And thank you, Mr. Burlington, for taking time to spend with us as well, and for the great work VML does. So we're going to move on. Claire, you're welcome to sit through the rest of the meeting and see how life looks as mayor and city council members. But we got several or more hours ahead of us. So anyway, here we go. But thanks again, Claire. So next up is the CBC. And so I want to turn it over. I'm not sure who is here tonight on behalf of CBC. I believe the high school students are here as well, aren't they?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
we did also have some written comments and two public speakers this evening.
Oh, I'm
so I don't
sorry.
know if you
Okay.
want to do that first.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and do that. Sure.
Okay. Let's get that going. So we did have some written comments that folks sent in. Dave Rifkin asked that the sidewalk repair in Whittier Park, specifically on Whittier Circle, be completed. He asked that the budget quoted for the project be reviewed since many of the streets in the neighborhood have already been repaired. Beth S. Helleman of 126 Whittier Circle also asked that all of the sidewalks in Whittier Park be repaired. David Tax from Claire and Don's Beach Shack asked that core drilling in the parking lot behind his restaurant not be permitted to take place during the lunch hour, as it is extremely loud and disturbing to those eating lunch. Jean Gresco of 120 North Fairfax Street asked that staff construct models to lower the real estate tax rate to as low as $1.10. Tony Shipman wrote in opposition to changing the name of the high school. Regarding the public hearing on the noise code tonight, Eric Pelton of 303 North Oak Street asked that no changes to the noise code be made that impact the status quo, including live outdoor music until 9 p.m. and a little later on the weekend. He said that the city and the landlord should be encouraged to find solutions to dampen the noise, and also said that the police should not be expected to respond repeatedly to noise complaints. He touted the benefits of having a vibrant music scene in the city and asked that changes to the code that would impair that scene not be adopted. We had comments on the Founders Row Phase 2 from Raphael and Regina Villasmil of 202 Patterson Street. They provided comments about the development application and said they did not support the project as presented because it was not designed to add value for the community. They expressed concern about design, timing of the project, traffic, noise, and environmental impact. And finally, Kristen Stamilio wrote to request a dog park be provided on the Fellows property. And then we do, thank you. And we do have two speakers here tonight. Robert Kelly is here to speak about the noise ordinance, and then we have Julie Krachman afterwards to speak about the Women's History Walk. So I think Mr.
Right.
Kelly was signed up first.
Well, let's have it. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly. Are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Rob Kelly, and I live at 455 South Maple Avenue at the Tinner Hill apartment building. I'd like to first thank you all for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm calling similarly to one of the written responses to voice my opposition to any changes regarding the extension of hours or raised decibel levels for outdoor music. We have been residents of Falls Church for 3 years and absolutely love living here. We have always felt a strong sense of community, a feeling that was underscored over the last 15 months of the COVID pandemic as our little city has rallied together, supported each other, and really unified to overcome the struggles of the past year. And we know that individuals, families, and businesses have all suffered tremendously. We love and support our small businesses, our local restaurants, and want them all to flourish and succeed. However, extending the outdoor music hour limit and raising decibel levels puts an unfair burden on the residents who are right adjacent to these music venues. Many of us work long weeks like you all do, work shift work, and have young children. And certain establishments seem to be taking no consideration for these residences who live next door. And this kind of flies in the face of that sense of community and togetherness that we've become so accustomed to here in Falls Church. Residents of our building should not have to call in noise complaints to the police every weekend. As residents of our building, we simply cannot open our windows on these nice, cool evenings on Thursday through Sunday nights because you can't hear anything in your own apartment. We cannot unwind and watch a movie on a Friday night in our own living room without putting the volume at full blast. We do not have this quiet enjoyment on those evenings And it's unfair to the local police, who have far better things to do than deal with noise complaints over and over again. It's unfair to them, and it's unfair to the taxpayers whose funds are being used over and over again on the same recurring issue. I'm sure the police are sick and tired of dealing with it as much as we all are living here. We should want businesses to succeed, and we do. And we should also want residences to enjoy living here in our little city the way that we do. But I thank you for your consideration. And again, I hope that no changes are made to the current noise and decibel level rules. Thank you again for your time. And I look forward to hearing how it all unfolds.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate your comments. Okay. Next up is Julie. Is she next? Julie Kretschmer, are you available? Are you on?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I am.
All right.
Thank you. I'm here to report briefly on the hugely successful Falls Church Women's History Walk that happened here in the city on Sunday, May 2nd. 2 years in the making, we had a spectacular day to celebrate many accomplished women of Falls Church from the past, present, and future. We honored these pioneers, abolitionists, educators, entrepreneurs, politicians, historians, artists, and activists. Their civic engagement and dedication helped establish Falls Church as a vibrant, responsive, and well-loved community. The walk was presented by the Women of Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation, Falls Church Elected Women, and the Falls Church Women's History Group, and we partnered with many other city organizations. Major funding from the DAR, Falls Church Chapter, CBC VPUS, the League of Women Voters, Falls Church Jazzercise, and the AAUW paid for our 47 beautiful signs and directionals, which were designed by former school board member and co-chair of the walk committee, Sally Eckfelt. We had volunteers from all walks of life, including the Chamber, the Girl Scouts, George Mason students, CBC youth reps, and members of city boards and commissions. And I must give a special shout out to Ron Anzalone of the Historical Commission, who researched and highlighted additional points of interest on the walk, as well as our own professional historian and Falls Church City Schools mom, Beth Hahn, who wrote our Falls Church News Press guest commentary. Our informational docents spread throughout the walk promoted our local eateries, and anecdotal evidence is telling us that the businesses along the walk saw much increased visitation and sales. We evidently had close to 1,000 participants, and thank our city staff from Public Works, who did a special cleanup of the rolling road, to Cindy Messer and Wyatt Shields for allowing us to use City Hall as one of our starting points, to our police chief who lent us 2 officers, and to our communications department who promoted the walk, and our lovely electronic sign. Vice Mayor Mary Beth Connolly was also integral to our success. All walks of the city were represented and brought together by the Falls Church Women's History Walk, and we're already planning for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an incredible event. I know many of us on council, if not all of us, participated, and we're delighted to see such a great turnout and to celebrate so many notable women. And we know there's more to come. We appreciate you highlighting the youth of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow, which is also a very exciting part of it, and the event on Saturday evening. So all the way around, a great event, and we want to thank you and Vice Mayor Connolly as well, who was instrumental in it. I know she's got her hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her right now. Mary Beth?
I just want to say thank you, Julie, for being here tonight, for sharing all that good news. There is a lot of good news there. And Julie, I also want to thank you, because you were really integral to making sure it happened as well. And I can't even count on one hand the number of times you walked the route and made it better every time you walked it. So thank you. Thank you and Sally both for doing that. And I was really glad when my phone didn't ring at 8 o'clock this Saturday morning with tips from you. So thank you. It was a wonderful community event, and I'm so glad so many participated. The other thing you didn't mention was thanks to Public Works for putting temporary sidewalks in on Maple Avenue and on Tinner Hill Road by the Tinner Hill Historic Site. We were really worried about people having to cross the street or be in danger, and what a great temporary sidewalk Zach and his team put in there so that we could be sure that people could be safe along Maple Avenue. So if we ever wanted to do that permanently, that'd be a great spot for a sidewalk. Thank you very much.
All right. A great event all the way around. Up next is our CBC appointed student reps. Julie, are you here for that as well?
Yes, we just figured we'd kill two birds with one stone. And I just have to say, I'm sorry, Mary Beth, I missed our early morning conversations. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th year of the CBC Youth Reps. Can you believe it? We currently have youth reps in grades 10 through 12 on 22 Falls Church City boards, commissions, and civic organizations. We just had our 21 training, which shows our representatives how to make the best and most significant impact on the groups which they serve. Our feedback from the organizations involved has been unerringly positive, and conversely, our youth tell us they are learning so much about how Falls Church City government works and how they can play a positive role now and in their futures. Thank you so much for your support of our program.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the program, because it supports us as well. And we learn so much from our student reps, and it's just great to have their involvement and input. So we thank you and the rest of the folks at CBC and the student reps themselves for participating. It's been a great experience, I think, all the way around. So thank you. All right. So let's keep
Mr.
moving.
Mayor?
Yes.
There is actually a motion to recognize the representatives. Maybe Cindy can put that up on the screen. It's in the staff report.
All right.
And so the council does a motion every year to recognize the students, and the list is provided to them. And then on Wednesday at 4 p.m., I'll be administering an oath of office to all of the new members.
And will that be done virtually?
It will be, and the link is on the city calendar. Just look up on Wednesday, you'll see it there, and anybody can join in.
All right, Mr. Duncan.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a motion?
Of course.
I move to recognize the Citizens for a Better City recommended students as youth representatives to boards, commissions, and civic organizations, and direct the city clerk to administer oaths of office to students serving on city boards and commissions.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lichtenhouse on the second. Madam Clerk or the City Attorney, do we need to do this by roll call, or can we just do a voice vote?
You should probably go ahead and do a roll call, just
All
because
right.
it's a motion.
Ms. Heath?
Yes. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Torter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you so much, Council.
All right, thank you. We'll see you on Wednesday afternoon. Thank you, Julie. All right, let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests?
Oh, I have a request.
You have a request?
I do. Sorry, I was on a different screen. Yes. My request is just regarding the sidewalks off of Hillwood there in the neighborhood where people are concerned about what their sidewalk replacement. And my request is just, is that in our plan? What's going on there? We've heard from them for a few
Vice
months.
Mayor Connolly, Zach Bradley, our Director of Public Works, has been working to address the issues, particularly on Smallwood. I think that is what the plan is to, the sidewalk there. It's essentially roots pushing the bricks up, and so the sidewalks end up having kind of a wave to them, which is a tripping hazard. And so the project would be to root prune and then relay those bricks in those affected areas. And Zach is working with the HOA, and particularly Chris Michelli, who's the president of the HOA. I want to thank him for working with us on this. And I think we have a solution to get, we may need to take a bite of it each year as it continues on, but we'll get the Smallwood street taken care of this year.
Wyatt, are all the sidewalks in that neighborhood 100% brick or some concrete?
They are a brick paver, and the city has for many years been in to replace different sections of the sidewalk, and so what we are planning to do is to continue that work, and right now I think Smallwood is the area of the greatest concern, and that's what we'll address this year.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, any other council requests? All right, let's move on to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. Just one thing to report tonight, and I'll touch base on the federal funding that has been announced today through the U.S. Treasury has released its rules as well as the initial allocations for ARPA dollars. And I'll just speak kind of briefly on what we know at this point. And the bad news is we don't have the full picture yet. What we do have is the city. It is confirmed that cities in Virginia, due to our unique status as independent cities, will get both a county allocation and basically an urban area allocation. And so the county allocation that is coming to the city is known at this point, and that will be $2 million. Let me get that figure, $2,839,000. And so that would be broken into two pieces with half this year and half this time next year. And then the second piece, which is the urban allocation, that will go straight to the Commonwealth of Virginia and will be dispersed to what are called non-entitlement units. And the CD and generally it's smaller cities or cities with a population of under 50,000, with some exceptions to that general rule. And that number is unknown at this point. And so we think the U.S. Treasury will provide more guidance on that, possibly in coming days. They're not clear as to exactly when that will be or whether even the state will make those allocations. We think that U.S. Treasury will for the non-entitlement localities, but we'll have to find out. The other thing that was big today is that the rules and regulations for the use of these funds was also released. It was released, the same day that the dollar amounts were released, at least for the counties and the major metropolitan areas. We're reviewing those now, and we'll participate in webinars and with our professional associations and the Virginia Municipal League to make sure we understand those. And because the money is coming in two tranches, with the first this year and the second next year, and then 4 years to spend it, what we are anticipating is we will be focusing on COVID recovery, obviously. Infrastructure projects have been noted from the beginning as an appropriate use of these dollars, as well as revenue replacement. And so we'll be studying these rules closely. I think we'll probably come to a better understanding of them over the coming days. So I don't plan to go into detail on those rules tonight, but let me stop there and just see if there are any questions on that.
Ms. Hardy?
My question's actually not on ARPA. I actually had a request from earlier, so I can wait.
Okay. ARPA questions, Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks very much. Mr. City Manager, do we have any sense about the state's process? Will it be done administratively? Will it be done by the General Assembly? The possible uses, and how are we geared up to defend?
So we don't actually have perfect clarity on that either, and there's been a lot of discussion regionally on this. With the mayors and chairs, they've invited officials from the state to discuss it, and we haven't gotten a whole lot of clarity from them exactly how it will be handled. Maybe I'll pause and ask the mayor who's been part of those discussions, or Cindy Mester, if they have any further information responsive to Mr. Snyder's request.
Well, I would just say on a call today, it seemed like there is a stronger possibility that it'll be done administratively, but that's been an open question. So I guess I would just reiterate, we don't have clarity on it yet. We are abdicating as a region There are a number of independent cities, for example, and small jurisdictions in Northern Virginia in particular. And so we have been strongly advocating for the region and for localities such as Falls Church with a number of state and federal officials that we've had on calls, including today. But I don't know if there's much more clarity. Cindy, you might have more, but they just came out this afternoon. And so a lot of it prior to this was speculation. As Wyatt said, they don't fully address all the issues what came out today. So there still are some outstanding questions. I know they had promised in the coming days to have additional guidance. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but Cindy, do you want to elaborate?
Thank you, Mayor. I did hear two pieces late this afternoon that I'll share. One is that the non-entitlement guidance from the U.S. Treasury is supposed to be out next week. And Secretary Lane communicated today, the Secretary of Finance for the Commonwealth, that until they see that guidance, they're not going to do any final determination and messaging out how they're going to handle it. But we are hearing more dialogue between them, as the mayor indicated, for administrative approach. And the federal regulations do sort of give a bellwether on how that money is to be allocated. And the one thing we did hear from administration is they are looking at sort of that per capita approach, which is consistent with the CDBG approach and what they did before to get it out. But beyond that, they're going to wait till we get the next set of U.S. Treasury guidance for those non-entitled communities where they have to pass through the local money through the state. And indications are we'll see that next week.
Okay, other questions, comments? Phil, Mr. Duncan?
Cindy, when you say administrative disbursement, you mean without the General Assembly having to meet and let the money go? Is that the note that we got from Rob Bullington this afternoon suggested that BML wants us to let our delegates and senators know that we would be happy if they would not wait to meet, which might not happen until August. Is that what the administrative disbursement avenue is meant to cure?
That is what's meant to cure. We have to actually get that executed. That's what we're hearing the dialogue is happening about. I think the administration wants confirmation from the General Assembly that the budget clause was for ARPA was related to the state portion, not the locality. And then the administration, the governor would feel more comfortable proceeding that way. As we've talked before, they can always go back and codify it by a budget action when they do meet again in special session, which they'll have to do in order to expend the state portion. It's not confirmed, however, but we are seeing slight directional shift towards that. And we have been advocating to our General Assembly members for sure statewide. I have a statewide meeting again this Thursday where we're talking to all localities in the Commonwealth, which include VACO and VML and VACO participation. We've been fortunate with the advocacy of our NVRC mayors and chairs for the federal delegation from Northern Virginia reaching out to the General Assembly to make it clear what the intent was for this money to move quickly to localities. Congressman Connolly in particular.
All right. And I know it's one of the bullet points for use is still invest in water, sewer, and broadband, but still no specificity on whether that water includes stormwater. It's not been narrowed down or not been specifically expanded to make that clear yet.
Actually, the guidance does include language that wastewater and stormwater can be included in infrastructure. So that's one positive thing that I definitely look for today. There are some qualifications on that in terms of the extent of it and so forth, but stormwater is now defined.
Oh, well, that's great. That buries the lead. I mean, that's the big news from tonight. That's great. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. So more to come, Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yeah, just a quick question. Cindy, can you give me those dollar numbers again that we have committed?
For the county portion, and Wyatt, I actually have the guidance with me and not the dollar amount, is 2.89 million and some change.
And we don't know what the indication is or what that means for the rest, what the other amount would be?
Correct. That's only the portion that's clearly targeted for us under the county portion. The part that's the non-entitled unit went to the state. All documentation is a lump sum and it's not broken out by locality yet.
What were we originally told that county piece would be back when we were talking about this a month or two ago?
There was two numbers out. One was 13 million and one was 10 million.
Well, I thought the county allocation.
Just the county piece.
The county piece was 3.1.
Yeah, so the county piece went from 3.1 to 2.89, and this other non-entitled piece, when we saw congressional allocations, had a 10 to 13 million dollar number attached to it. But that was from the congressional office staff. It hasn't been adjudicated through the U.S. Treasury portion.
Okay. Just trying to draw some correlations here, but it doesn't look like I'll be able to do that. So, all right, thanks.
And even when we looked at other localities' numbers and why it's been sort of tracking some comparisons, there's been some significant changes and some discrepancy in the locality allocation amounts that we're still trying to sort through.
Well, let's hope that discrepancy works out in our favor.
Yeah, so
just
more to come.
More to come. I do think that those earlier larger numbers are not likely based on the metropolitan numbers that were released. It seems like they're significantly smaller. I just put that out there for managing expectations.
Yeah, and so there's a lot also to be culled through and sorted out, and this has just not been clean cut. Every step of the way, it's been longer and cloudier and more difficult to ascertain just sort of every step. So I guess I would just say it looks like we got more of that to sort through, but we are working on it. Again, we were on a call today, trying to anticipate what's going to be coming out. I think there's going to be a lot of analysis tonight and tomorrow about what's come out to date, and we can share that with council as soon as we obtain it. But there are a lot of folks picking through these rules and regulations and what's come out to offer analysis. There may be more questions than answers. We just really have to dig into it, but hopefully they'll get some more clarity the next day or two. All right, unless there's anything else on this, why don't we move on to business on the agenda? We do have a very busy agenda tonight. Madam Clerk, do you want to call the first item?
Mayor, sorry, I still had requests from earlier that wasn't ARPA related.
Okay.
I'll be quick. Wyatt, do you have an update on the bicyclist who was injured last week at Haycock and Broad? And then that's kind of the short term. What we're doing about kind of near term safety with all the extra kids we have going to the middle and high school, and then plans for kind of the long run, how to improve that intersection beyond the grant money that we're putting in.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I do not have any information on the cyclist. We do, what I am told is that the cyclist was not associated with the school, was not a parent or a child, but was rather a commuter. But I don't have their status. I'll see if I can find out. In terms of follow-up from the accident that occurred, that many of our students witnessed as they were participating in Bike to School Day, we've been working quite a bit with the school administration on safe routes to school during construction. The former high school is under demolition right now, and so it's very important. So after that accident, we did do a kind of a regathering together with Sue Long, who's our project manager, along with planning staff and with school staff, just to review and our public safety aides that are up there, are probably our best witnesses to how things are working or where we can make improvements. So they got together to discuss it, and I think there are going to be some tweaks to it. I think one of the key things that we want to emphasize to people who are going to school is that the safest place to cross is there in the middle of Haycock, where our crossing guards are. It is obviously when the crossing light is flashing, if one is very alert and aware, one can cross at Haycock and Route 7. And that's probably, for those who are trying to get to Mary Ellen Henderson, that would be the most direct route, particularly if you're coming from the south side of town. But what we need to look at is because that's such a busy intersection with left turns and lots of activity going on, whether we can either have more signage to direct people to Haycock or other safety measures for that intersection. It is located in Fairfax County, and there is some hesitancy about having our public safety aides attempt to do traffic calmings at that intersection because of its complexity. And so I think where we're going is to try to direct people to go to that mid-block crossing where crossing guards have historically been. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but that's kind of the state of discussion at this point.
Thank you. Thank you for getting that group together and working on some solutions in the short term. I think it won't be a surprise to you that I'm a fan of making sure that the infrastructure also makes it more safe. And it's beyond having a crossing guard, which I know is obviously a good solution during school hours. Hopefully that becomes a busy pedestrian area, people going to the metro, going to the future 10-acre development. And so if it means doing things like LPIs or actually just walk signals for everybody and not letting anyone turn, you wouldn't have issues like this where people could turn into bicyclists. So if it's part of that $15 million grant where we can actually rework the signals and actually just create kind of safer pedestrian zones for everybody, so it's not just students, I think I would be a fan of doing that too.
Vice Mayor Connolly.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. Wyatt, you said that's a Fairfax County intersection. Is the whole thing a Fairfax County intersection? Or a part of it is now Falls Church with our land addition?
The entire intersection is located within Fairfax County.
Okay. That makes it a little simpler.
The city did obtain the grant, and one of the objectives of that grant is to make that intersection more pedestrian friendly. Doing that through VDOT and through the Fairfax County process is going to be a challenge. There's just no question about it. And things like some of the things that Councilmember Hardy just suggested, and our experience when working with VDOT and Fairfax County is that those are things they're not used to, but we'll continue to work it.
Hopefully our friends in Fairfax.
That is the intent of that grant.
Right. Okay. My other question is, and this is probably not related to the grant, but I'm just wondering about the routes to school before they get to Haycock along Broad Street. I don't know if any police have taken a look there, or kids cutting through the giant parking lot, and what is the safety status there, and how much responsibility does the city have to ensuring that as kids come through the community, they get to that crosswalk safely?
Well, we certainly feel the responsibility. Rather than just answering on an ad hoc basis, let me follow up with our professional staff and maybe have a better response.
Okay, because part of the commute to school is through the parking lot of a large shopping center for some kids, and some kids it's not. And I'm just wondering if anyone's talked to the shopping center, or if there are other concerns related to the increase in student traffic on foot and on bike.
I'll just say briefly, we've had many conversations with Federal Realty on bike lanes through the property and things like that, and it's a pretty long and involved discussion, and we could carve out some more time to discuss that with council.
Okay,
I was
thanks.
just gonna say that if we could invite the CACT for kind of an upcoming joint work session, I think they're actually discussing, and there's this coming meeting. So the CACT looked at like 6 different routes essentially coming from the eastern side of town to get to the middle and high school campus, whether it's through Offutt, behind Falls Plaza, or any of those combinations. And so I think they're going to be able to come to us with the recommendation of what they think is the most viable for kind of an official path that would be safer than kind of the meandering that happens right now.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Snyder?
Sure. One of our priorities in the past few years has been obtaining the NVTA grant for $15 million to redesign that intersection. So that's in the works. Wyatt, maybe you could give a little bit of a timeline for that, and certainly I think lessons learned along the way will be included in the final work there.
Yes, and I will say that, that is part of the site plan. And so I think there was a briefing, maybe it was probably too quick on what that intersection would look like. And there are some competing priorities. The Fairfax County's top priority is traffic throughput, no question about it. And they've been very forceful about that in their discussions. Our priority has been pedestrian safety through that intersection. And sometimes those two things are in conflict with each other, particularly for, the length of a pedestrian crossing time and, the length of the signal cycle and those types of things. But the design, I think we're on the same page with of trying to have good pedestrian refuges and as narrow passages for pedestrians as possible. In other words, shrink the lane width down so it's less of a long walk for pedestrians. I think we're on the same page with those types of improvements.
Okay, well, if you need any help in working with Fairfax County, please let me know. We worked really hard to get that grant, as you know. That's helpful. Also, I think a couple of our boards and commissions are readying electric vehicle charging recommendations, since Letty brought up the CACT's work on the safe routes to school, which are very important. In addition, there's some work being done on electric vehicle charging that ought to be included in DC. So pass that on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So unless there's any other comments on this matter, let's move on to business on the agenda. Again, we do have a closed session as well, so it's going to be a long night probably. Madam Clerk, you want to call the first item?
Yes, our first item is TO 21-06, ordinance setting the rate of tax levy on real estate for tax year 2022 and on personal property, machinery and tools, and all other property segregated by law for local taxation in the city of Falls Church, Virginia for the tax year 2021.
All right, thank you very much. Before we get to it, there may be a few disclosures people would like to make. Vice Mayor Connolly or Mr. Snyder, is there anything you all want to say?
I have to pull it up. Well, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. Mr. Snyder, did you have anything, Andy, you wanted to say?
I have an adult independent daughter who's an employee of the Falls Church School Board, works as part of the school system, and I can vote on this budgetary action without any prejudice in regard to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Connolly, were you ready or still need a moment?
Nope, I'm ready.
All right.
I make the following statement before City Council's discussion of TO 21-06, adopting the FY22 tax rates, and TO 21-09, an amendment to the FY 2021 general fund budget. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by these matters. I can participate in them fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
All right, I have one also. I make the following statement for City Council's consideration of TO 21-06, setting the FY 2022 tax rates, and TO 21-09, an amendment to the FY 21 budget. My wife's an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by this matter. I can participate in it fairly, objectively, in the public interest. All right, unless there's anything else, let's go on to the staff report. Ms. Bauer, Mr. Shields?
Mr. Shields, perhaps I can just make a note about this one. Council, these are the same tax rates upon which you held a public hearing on April 26th, and they were before you at that time. In this ordinance, the real estate tax rate is set at $1.32. You may recall that was the decision made at that time. But after the public hearing and council's discussion, because of the moving parts, the motion wasn't perfectly clear to include all the parts, and therefore we're simply asking that council act on this motion at this time to ensure that all tax rates are properly adopted by ordinance. So there's
right.
no need for a public hearing or even discussion if you can just take the motion.
Got it. So this isn't a substantive discussion or reopening of anything. It's really kind of a cleanup or technical resolution of issues that were a little bit untidy at our
That's
hearing.
correct. This is exactly what I think was intended last time, and it just needs to be clarified, and that's why we are asking that you do it again.
All right. So for starters, does anyone have any questions? And if not, is there a motion that can be made?
Mr. Mayor,
To adopt TO 21-06.
Snyder seconds.
All right. Any discussion? And you said no public comment is necessary?
That's correct. All that was done at the April 26th meeting.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk.
Yes, and also I did want to mention that Mr. Gresco, who asked to look at lowering the tax rate, sent me another message and wanted to make sure that staff knew and council knew that he was appreciative of the tax rate that you did set and for the hard work that you did on it. So I didn't want to neglect his comment on that. And
All right.
would you like
tell him thank you. All right, let's go, Madam Clerk.
Would you like me to call the roll on this?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going.
We have TO 21-01, ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify Chapter 14 Environment, Article 3 Noise of the Code of the City of Falls Church to remove provisions defining violations as those that disturb a reasonable person, create an exception for small power equipment operation during daytime, allow higher decibel levels and longer daytime hours on weekends in commercial and industrial districts.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. This ordinance is now before council on second reading and final consideration. And, what it would do is, just as the clerk said, is that the ordinance that was adopted on first reading would allow later daytime hours for basically, what we're talking about is outdoor entertainment is the effect of it. And that would extend the higher decibel limits to 10:30 in the evening, and it would also set the decibel levels in industrial zones at 75 decibels, and other commercial districts where restaurants are located, it would set those limits at currently what was adopted at first reading. Getting down to that chart real quick, would set those at 75 decibels as well. After looking at the data that the police have collected as they've been out with the decibel meter, as well as reviewing other regulations that are in place in Northern Virginia and across the Commonwealth, and also I think following a sound test that we did at Cherry Hill Park, the staff recommendation would be to keep the decibel limits at the existing code level, and in other words, not increasing them. And so that would mean at 70 decibels in industrial zones and at 65 decibels in all other commercial zones where restaurants are typically located. And also to have the extension of daytime hours at 10 p.m. as opposed to 10:30. That's the staff recommendation on this. And let me stop there. There's been a lot of discussion on this ordinance, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. I want to particularly thank Captain Steve Rao, who's worked this issue. I think really tried to address community concerns, but also have the police department in a posture to work very cooperatively with our business community. To the extent that there's been any commentary that this is an anti-business recommendation, I would simply state that I think our record has been to work very cooperatively with our businesses. And the reason for that is in many respects, our business community, particularly through the COVID pandemic, has worked very hard to be to keep their patrons safe and their customers safe and their employees safe throughout this. And I think that it is the case that the city has actually been a bit more flexible on outdoor dining and on outdoor entertainment than most jurisdictions have been. And I think that is reflective of our efforts to always try to work with our business community because that relationship is so strong. But those are the recommendations that staff have, is to keep the decibel levels basically as they have been in the code, and to have the extension of daytime hours in those commercial zones be extended to 10 p.m. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. So before we get started with questions and comments, let me just make a comment, if that's what it is. We've spent many hours on this, and so I would just suggest that it is time to work towards resolving this, to getting something approved. It may not be perfect. It may need some changes and tweaking over time. There may be additional legislation that's needed to allow outdoor music at restaurants and venues after COVID is over. And so this may be a work in progress. So I would just plant that seed. If this does become an extensive conversation, given what else is on the agenda, I might suggest once again we push this off to a work session if we can't come to consensus. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions and comments from folks. Any questions or comments? So Ms. Hiscott and then Ms. Hardy.
Yes, just a few quick comments. I appreciate the data collection specifically, because I think that demonstrated for me that our current decibel levels were already covering the work that's being done and the music and the outside entertainment that's being enjoyed for the vast majority of those locations and those times that Captain Rao and his staff collected that. So to me, that enforces the staff recommendation of retaining our decibel levels where they are. So thank you for that. I'd like to keep them that way, and so recommend moving to adopt with the amendment suggested by staff. And then again, just to reiterate your statement, Mayor Tarter, and I believe what's at the end of the staff report is that I'd like to work on how we can address keeping the outdoor entertainment going post-pandemic, which looks like it may be as soon as June 15th. So this is one issue that we can hopefully move forward and set aside. And then the follow-on issue is ensuring that we can have this kind of entertainment outside post what could be as early as June 15th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hardy?
Debbie said what I was going to say, that I think the data collection was helpful, and so I would support the staff recommendation of 10 p.m. and 65 decibels. The thing I would clarify, Wyatt, is that it's currently extended to 10 p.m. already under the emergency order. And so that's what our restaurants and the community has been used to. And so while it's an extension from the 9 p.m., which was pre-COVID, it's been 10 p.m. since last May or June, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So it won't feel different for businesses, because I think I want to make sure that businesses don't feel like, oh, we suddenly change things on them. But I think that it'll still be operating off the same 10 o'clock on Fridays, Saturdays, and weekends. And then I think that final point on making sure that we have a pathway, both provide flexibility kind of in the long run and better regulation on this city's part. I think using our police officers this way is probably not sustainable. So I think doing it through zoning would make sense. So I look forward to that discussion.
All right, Mr. Snyder.
Sure, thanks a lot. I think the staff report is an effort to find a reasonable balance here. So I support it based upon the input we've received and the work that has been done at this point. I think my question will be finding some flexibility for staff to flex things based upon unique circumstances. The unique circumstance may be the proximity of a major residential building, and if enforcement doesn't handle the complaints, that we can flex things so that we can address particular circumstances without affecting the other businesses that aren't in those circumstances. But I think this is as good a balance as we're going to be able to get at this point to give our businesses some degree of certainty moving forward as they make plans. And I know they've requested that. And I want to see options for how we are better able to tailor this, perhaps increases from this or decreases depending on particular circumstances, whether that's through zoning or through some other mechanism. But I hope that in addition to approving whatever we're doing tonight, that we'll also ask city staff to report back to us their recommendation on how to be able to tailor the noise ordinance more effectively than we've been able to do so far to particular circumstances. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with everybody up to this point. You know, I like the original changes that went into first reading, and while I appreciate all the staff's efforts and the demonstration that we had at Cherry Hill, I just simply am not convinced that for a weekend night for a venue that wants to play music, that 65 decibels is the appropriate level. Is it 75 as it's gone into first reading? I don't know, but I think for businesses like State Theater and Clarendon's, when you're trying to balance outdoor music like that, I think keeping it at 65 decibels is setting those businesses up for controversy on those evening nights. I do appreciate and I do like the fact that we've extended hours on the weekends, but I think it needs to be a higher decibel level. I think it's just totally unreasonable in an urban environment like this with the developments and the vibrancy and the type of entertainment venues that we're trying to bring into that context. At 65 decibels is the decibel level, frankly, for another era. And so I, for one, just based on what I've heard myself and thinking about what we're trying to accomplish here, I just simply do not think that 65 decibels is reasonable. So, if there is a middle ground to be found between 65 and 75 and it's 70, I will be okay with that. But if that is not the case, then I will support this as it's been advertised and illustrated for first reading, not with staff's recommendations for change. I will say, however, I do wholeheartedly agree with the fact that this should not be law enforcement's responsibility to enforce, whether it's 65, 70, or 75. Our law enforcement have other things that they need to tend to. And I agree with my fellow council members. This is something that should be enforced through zoning like we see in other jurisdictions, because this is just simply not a law enforcement responsibility. So I do agree with that. And then the final thing I'll say, regardless of where this ends up tonight, I would also like to explore those opportunities for certain businesses in certain areas to receive exceptions in certain times of the year, and more than just on a special event occasion. I do want to point out that I think that it is somewhat incongruent, our desire to create a more dense, vibrant, kind of urban, walkable entertainment kind of a plan here in the city, while at the same time maintaining these types of strict, what I would think broad brush noise ordinances that, again, are not compatible with what we are developing here. But again, that's just one person's opinion. So I will, unless someone can find a middle ground between 75 and 65, I'm going to vote for this as is right now without the amendment.
All right, Ms. Conley, Vice Mayor Conley.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. One of the things that has come up in our discussion of this noise ordinance is the challenge of having residential areas within a business zoning district. So because the people who live in Tinner Hill and Pearson Square and others are living in an area that is zoned for business, there are different requirements about noise than if it was a completely residential area. And that's not something that we've had to really look at before as we've approved special exceptions. So one of the things I'd like staff to be sure of as we go forward is that that is something that's under consideration as we're looking at special exceptions. What are they doing to ensure, the residences are buffered from noise in a way that maybe some of these earlier buildings that are already built have not been. So I don't know if that can be part of voluntary concessions or other requirements that we have going forward. I think that would solve some of these problems as well. And then I agree with Ms. Hardy and Ms. Hiscott that I will support this with the amendment. I am very interested, though, in what kind of relief are we doing for families like the man who spoke earlier, whose family life is really being negatively affected by the loud music that's coming on a regular basis. And so I would look forward to hearing what kind of zoning enforcement we're going to have, what kind of permitting there will be, or ability for the city to say, yes, you can have live music, but you can't do it 5 days a week for 12 hours. What are we doing there? Because I think that is really important as a companion piece here. Very important. And then the other thing is, if we go to line 317, where we're talking about small power equipment, the blue line says you can't operate powered saw, drill, sander, grinder, lawn, or garden tool during the nighttime. But we've decided that the nighttime starts at 10 p.m. So that means that someone could actually be using a drill, saw, sander right next door to me at 9 p.m.
Well, the extension to 10 p.m. is just for those commercial zones and industrial zones. So
okay.
You are correct that I think that small power equipment could be used in those commercial districts an hour later than is currently the case, but it would not be something that would be occurring out in residential districts.
Okay, so that's right. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share, I think, Mr. Littenhouse's concerns that 65 decibels may be not quite where I'm comfortable landing on this. I'm hearing what other people are saying, though, and trying to reach, some common ground here. I guess my questions are turning on the process for, as Mr. Snyder said, and Mr. Littenhouse too, special rules or exceptions or permits to be issued through some process that the city will set up. I mean, for instance, let's say that some venue, as a normal course of business, wants to do music on Thursday nights till 10 o'clock, which, for certain summer weekends is kind of when the weekend begins on Thursday nights. What provisions, if I vote for this tonight, do we have to allow that to be considered if it can be considered? Or are we just trying to say, no, Thursday is out. Thursday is a non-starter. You've got to quit at 9 o'clock. Only Friday and Saturdays are within the bounds. Well, what are we doing if a venue wants to do Thursday nights?
They can do Thursday nights. It's just that they would be staying within the decibel limits for those hours.
So the hours would be 9 o'clock for Thursday night.
Yeah, they could still have music. It's just the level is lower.
So I guess I would ask others how we feel about that. I mean, do we want to have? Are we going to set up? My impression in the discussions that we had at Cherry Hill Park were that we might set up a process where venues could come and, rather than just for a special event, could ask for rules that were specific to their venue. And I'm wondering if I vote for this tonight, are we going to try to go down that road, or is that just something that we're talking about but we're not going to do?
I mean, I think the idea tonight is to get this initial legislation on the books take off the reasonable person standard, which makes things unenforceable, and use this as a starting point. And then the notion is to go ahead and dig deeper and find a more coherent way and comprehensive way to have outdoor music throughout the city. But I think this is going to be a two-step dance. I mean, to my mind, this is not all-encompassing, but it is a start, and it's something on the books, as opposed to waiting and try to sort of sort this out in one fell swoop, which has been difficult for us to do. So I think that's the notion I understand, but Mr. Shields may want to elaborate.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we're not actually, I appreciate that answer, and that's the direction in which I certainly want to go. But I'm concerned that without a council, direction to do that, we'll check this off and move on. And maybe that's what, wants to happen. I personally would like to see us, given the demonstrations that I saw and my own experience trying to measure my decibel with my decibel reader, which seemed to track the professional one that we had at Cherry Hill Park. The situation is so venue specific. I mean, we heard this from the State Theater people. They're working really hard to try to stay at 65, and they can't always do it depending on which way the wind is blowing and depending on whether leaves are on the trees. And I don't know, it just seems like we are small enough to be able to accommodate discussions of that sort here in, the little city, in order to, come to a reasonable arrangement with the business and its neighbors. And so I would like to see us, resolve to do that, even as we pass whatever we're going to pass here tonight. I like the extension to 10 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. I think that's good. I think that should be a hard stop. I mean, I do think the venues need to be policed. My experience in driving around town was, the crowd gets excited and one more, and it's 10 after 10 and the music's still playing. Well, that needs to stop. 10 o'clock means 10 o'clock. But everything else I've said before, related to, venue specific permission process is something I would like to see us go towards.
All right. Mr. Lichtenhouse, then Mr. Snyder, and then let's try to wrap up this conversation and move to a vote if we can.
Yeah, just a point of clarification here, just based on the Vice Mayor's comments in reference to the gentleman that spoke earlier. What is in first reading right now, and then what staff's recommendation is going to be, does nothing to impact what happens between Sunday and Thursday. Is that correct? So where we are right now and then what's being recommended does nothing to impact anything during the week. Is that correct? Wyatt? You're muted, Wyatt. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So for everybody that's listening and folks that have been concerned about noise or music during the week, they need to understand that what we're talking about here does not change the status quo up to this point. We are strictly talking about Friday and Saturday and extended hours. And I think that that's important because I feel like that this conversation of a noise ordinance has gotten into this tiff about what people feel is inappropriate during the week. And right now they should not, it seems the way that this is going, no one should expect anything to change during the week if that's what they're upset about. So I don't want them to think that there's some sea change that's coming related to noise. So that's all I had, just that clarification. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder, and let's try to move to a vote.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put a motion on the table.
All right.
Move to adopt the staff recommendations to TO 21-01, along with a direction to staff to provide recommendations on how best to tailor the issue to particular circumstances to be reported back to City Council within a month.
All right. I'm going to ask the city attorney, any issue with that?
So I just want to, if I could just clarify, I think, Mr. Snyder, this is what you intended, that you're moving to adopt TO 2101 with the amendments set forth in the report for the second recommendation, and then in addition to direct the staff to prepare recommendations for the flexibility. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I second that.
For tailoring, flexibility for tailoring to particular circumstances.
Okay.
All right. Was that Mr. Duncan on the second?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Snyder. I second that motion.
All right. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No additional public comment.
All right. So I have not made any comment. I'm going to briefly and quickly. I will support this motion. I do think it's a balance. As we get more urban, we want to support our businesses, but we also need to be cognizant of neighbors and their needs and concerns. I think this number 65 is consistent with our neighbors, but I believe we are more agile and have an ability, as Mr. Duncan intimated, to tailor this and to make sure that we address and balance as appropriately as possible the needs of our businesses and those of our neighbors. I would like to see outdoor music throughout this city. With appropriate regulation. I think it creates a vibrancy, an excitement, and just a level of just fun, to make it a great place to be and attract visitors to our businesses. And so I want to make sure we are able to do that. But I think what is before us now is appropriate first step. And hopefully with some staff recommendations in the coming days, we can fully address this issue before June 15th. So I will support the motion. Unless there's any further comment, why don't we go ahead to the vote, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
No.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Charter?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you. You call the next item, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have on first reading TO 21-09, ordinance to amend ordinances 2009, 2012, 2016, 2018, and 2023 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues appropriating funds for fiscal year 2021 for the General Fund, Stormwater Fund, Affordable Housing Fund, the School Activity Fund, and the Capital Improvements Program funds.
All right, 2 questions before we get started. Madam City Attorney, do we need to read our disclosure again?
No, they
right.
referenced both items for tonight.
All right, in 2023, already on 2023?
Oh, that's the ordinance number. That's not the year.
Oh, okay.
We're up
right.
to ordinance 2023.
Okay. All right, let's go on, and Ms. Bawa, or whoever's going to handle the staff portion, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Charter and members of the council. So we have before you the 4th budget amendment for the current fiscal year 2021. The general fund requests were presented at the work session, and there are no changes to it. It includes an expenditure of $2.14 million for the West Falls Church development project, of which $1.92 million is for the relocation of the regulator station for Washington Gas, and $220,000 for legal and other consulting fees related to closing of the ground lease by December. We are requesting a transfer of $2 million from the capital reserve and reallocation of $140,000 from unexpended debt service, which is already in the current year's budget. Also, the next general fund request is reprogramming of $564,000 in current year underspending from public safety, sheriff's office, and recreation and parks to fund CIP PAYGO projects that were excluded from the fiscal year 2022 budget as it was adopted on April 26th, and it funds neighborhood traffic calming, sidewalks, and city facilities upgrades. and also Department of Public Works to pay for sharrows on Park Avenue and redo of crosswalks and other miscellaneous projects that need to be completed, and assistance for Employee Advisory Council. And another request for the general fund is appropriation of the federal grant received for the body-worn cameras for $49,000. A little over $49,000, an equal amount of match. The match, we would be using savings from the current year police department operating budget, and an appropriation request of $805,000 for school activity fund, which is required by the new gas fee standard 84. The two new requests, in addition to what was discussed last Monday, is a request for appropriation of $4,150,000 for in the affordable housing fund for affordable home ownership program and teacher workforce units program, which is funded using the $3.75 million grant funds from the Reach Virginia program and $400,000 in required local match from the affordable housing fund balance. And lastly, in CIP fund, the Capital Improvement Program fund, there's a request for appropriation of $50,000, which is a contribution received from the Library Foundation for the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library for expansion and renovation project to pay for the mural and staff furniture. And that concludes my report. Happy to address any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. Let's open it up to questions. Let me ask the city clerk, are there any public comment to this matter?
No, sir.
All right, questions, comments from council? Do we have a motion then? Well, looks like we got a comment. Ms. Hardy?
Just a quick one. Wyatt, is the only change from last week the addition of the Tinner Hills wayfinding signs?
Kieran, was there any other addition? I know there was that one. Was there any other change?
You're on mute, Kieran.
Sorry. So, yeah, no, it also includes the $21,100 for the Tinner Hill signs.
Okay, but everything else we reviewed in work session last week.
Yeah. Yes.
Got it. Thank you. No, I appreciate that we were able to add that in, as well as restoring the PAYGO funding that we took out of FY22. So thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
I agree with Ms. Hardy. Thanks for the Tinner Hill add-in. The PAYGO, just administratively, how do we explain how we're going to spend this money out? I mean, this is now part of the budget of the current fiscal year. But we're not actually going to get all this work done by June 30th, or do I have that right? Or
Mr. Duncan, your action today would allow us to encumber these funds and start working on the design. And by the time the second ordinance happens, it's end of May. So we'll encumber the funds in June and start expending them on July 1st.
I see. Okay, so it just gives us a couple of months head start on things, which is good, I think. There's been some discussion, I think, a work session about allocation for festive lighting for the trees. I think there's been some staff work. I just wonder if Mr. Shields could give us an update on that. I guess it's not ready quite yet for this budget amendment, but is that coming through the pipeline?
No, yes, we were working on that, and that'll be possibly subject to a future budget amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Tree lighting is in the current budget, but if we were expanding it, then that would be a budget amendment down the road.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I would support additional tree lighting. I think it's very festive and helps our downtown businesses. So it's my 2 cents. Any other comments or questions from council? Do we have a motion?
I move to grant first reading to TO 21-09, schedule second reading and public hearing for May 24th, 2021, and advertise the same according to law.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And I tell you, before we move on to the next item, if I could just ask, we take maybe a short recess, go ahead and take our recess now. And so if everyone's agreeable, maybe we can reconvene at 9 o'clock. It's 8:54 right now. Just take a 5-minute break for us to refresh and then go back at it at 9 o'clock. So unless there's any objection, let's take a 5-minute recess if we could. Thank you.
information, Olga.
Okay. I'm going to slow roll it just a little bit because we have a delay on the live stream. And I think we're ready to go. So our next item is TO 21-10, ordinance to create and establish the West Falls Church Community Development, the West Falls Community Development Authority, excuse me.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I would note at the outset of our staff report tonight that there is a closed session to discuss any particular advice that the council may wish to have from legal counsel with respect to this Community Development Authority. So I just want to note that at the outset. For the public and for the council, this ordinance is now before the City Council for your first reading, and a request that the creation of the CDA be duly advertised according to law and brought back to council after a public hearing at your meeting in June. In summary, what a Community Development Authority would do it would have the boundaries of the approximately 10-acre West Falls Church, West Falls development site. It would be created stemming from a petition from the leaseholders and owners of that property. Currently, that includes, currently it's owned by the City of Falls Church, but the intention is to transfer it to the Economic Development Authority, and the EDA then will execute a 99-year ground lease with Falls Church Gateway Partners. All of the partners have been working on their petitions, so we'll give you a report tonight on the status of those petitions from our legal counsel. And what the district will basically allow is for improvements to be made within the boundaries of that approximately 10-acre district, improvements that will be public in nature and are all related to infrastructure, streets, sewer pipes, stormwater facilities, that type of thing, that would be constructed in the 10-acre site. The anticipated dollar amount is between $12 and $15 million of bonds that would be issued by this Community Development Authority. And in addition, the Community Development Authority would then be authorized to impose a special assessment on the boundary or the property within the boundaries of the district. Again, the approximately 10-acre West Falls development that would then pay the debt service for those bonds over the life of the bonds. It's anticipated that this $12 to $15 million would be structured as 30-year bonds. So that's a quick summary of what is the intent of the Community Development Authority. Another thing I will note is that with the creation of the authority, there would be what's envisioned and what is sort of encompassed in this would be a 5-member board, which would include a member of the City Council, a member of the Economic Development Authority, a member of staff, a citizen representative, i.e. someone who lives within the city limits and has expertise in this area, and then a suggested member by the Falls Church Gateway Partners. All of the members of the CDA board, however, would be appointed by and basically serve at the pleasure of the City Council. And that's important for maintaining the tax-exempt status of the debt that's issued by the CDA. The IRS typically looks favorably upon having the governing body have control over the full membership. That's a summary, and let me just ask Carol if she would like to make any other comments and introduce our outside legal counsel that's been advising us on this. We're also joined by representatives of Davenport LLC, who's the city's longstanding financial advisor, and very glad to have them on this call as well. Carol.
Yes, we have Joe Mason and Jen Dirksen from Davenport, and we have Peter Canzano and Jim McGettrick from the law firm of Norton Rose Fulbright. At the current time, because the city and the other parties, that is the developer and one landowner, because we have not agreed on the specific terms of the petition, this first reading is going to have to wait, I believe, and we will consider it in 2 weeks, because you are only authorized to create a CDA upon the petition of 51% of the landowners, and we are discussing the specific terms of that. So we can certainly talk about it a little bit, but I would suggest that any discussion of any risks or concerns about that be done in closed session with our outside counsel and Davenport. But to do the first reading, I believe we will have to bring this back to you in 2 weeks when we should have an agreed petition before you. So I would be happy if Peter or Jim could agree or tell us we can move forward without that. And then if there are any questions, and as I said, questions about risk, et cetera, I believe we should save for closed meeting and advice of the attorneys to help you all.
All right, thank you. I mean, on some level, it seems that if we're going to have a closed session, that our voting on this ought to wait till we have information in closed session and not before. It seems like the cart's maybe before the horse. But why don't we start with questions or general comments from counsel? Does counsel have any questions for attorneys? So do you have Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yeah, I had a question that I had raised last week. I think it was last week. They're all starting to run together. Anyway, a question about what happens with the CDA after we have retired the debt for this initial infrastructure project. Can we layer on additional debt for new projects that benefit that area of the city?
Jim McGettrick, I'm going to ask you to jump in afterwards and correct me if I'm wrong, but under the statutes governing CDAs, the petition and the ordinance creating the CDA has to set forth what it's going to do in the plan of finance. And that's because the petition from 51% of the landowners essentially establishes their agreement to additional taxes or special assessments that they're going to be paying. So if the CDA was to take on other projects in the future, they would have to act pursuant to a petition, a new petition, and then a new ordinance that called for doing that work. The petition that will be before you and the ordinance will set forth what the parameters of what the CDA is going to do. So without a new petition in the future, the CDA couldn't just do something additional or request counsel to do something additional, but it could be done through a later petition from landowners.
And when you say landowners, you mean the city?
Well, it would be property owners. It might include those who held ground leases on the property as well, which is why we have several parties doing it now, and it's not just the city.
When you say, you mean might or will? Because that's a big difference as to whether or not we have unilateral control over what we want to bond and tax over there and what we don't.
I'm going to ask Jim or Peter to jump in on that because. Go ahead.
Hi, Carol. I'm happy to answer that question for the council member. In fact, the way the ordinance will be set up and the way the CDA will be set up, there will be no legal authority for the CDA to issue any debt without the city's council's explicit approvals. In terms of other debt down the road besides the initial debt, there are some practical factors that flow from the nature of the statute and the legal setup that we ought to probably discuss in closed session so we can give you a very fulsome answer to the question.
Okay. That has to be discussed in closed session?
Well, there's to really give you a free and unfettered and completely transparent legal analysis. There's some items that are probably best privileged.
Okay, well, let me ask a follow-on question to that then. Is there anything prohibiting us right now from establishing a special taxing district for that area that would raise money in the same way based on the assessed value of the assets themselves to fund debt for the type of work that we're talking about?
Jim, you want to tackle the question of special districts, since that's something you have a lot of experience in?
Sure. This is Jim McGettrick. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, there are theoretically other kinds of special taxing districts that the city might be able to establish to do at least some of this work. To be honest, we haven't looked at them in a while because this was presented to us as a CDA proposal. Most of my experience is with counties, but cities have a lot of the same authority to establish various kinds, and there's a laundry list of different kinds of taxing districts under Virginia law. I'd have to look at the specific statute to see if everything that you want to do that's proposed, at least for this CDA, is something that could be accomplished with another vehicle or not. But it's theoretically possible, and I can look at it if you wanted me to.
Okay. Well, maybe there's some things we need to talk about in closed session, but I'll just publicly raise my I guess continued questions and concerns, and that is, one, there are going to be incrementally more service costs associated with this development in the city, given its density. And one of the things that was of interest to me when we decided to strike out and do this deal, however many years ago that was, 3 years ago, was to ensure that we could add to the tax base above and beyond the standard tax rate and value to tax rate mechanism that we apply to all property owners in the city. Now, CDA is one way to do that. However, if it requires us to reconstitute this CDA every time that debt expires, and we don't have unilateral authority as a city to do that, that can create a problem, or maybe not create a problem depending on who you ask, but it does not accomplish what I think is important mechanism. And so we may want to also consider a special taxing district over there at some point in the future, because again, those incremental service costs will allow us to address those without carrying that, or without the rest of the cities or sort of rest of the residents in the city carrying that tax burden. So we can talk about that more in closed session. Those are my questions and concerns.
All right. Thank you. Other comments? Questions? All right. So we are going to be going into closed session shortly, and our attorneys will stay with us and discuss anything that's appropriately privileged at that time. But are there other questions that are appropriate for public conversation right now, or comments?
Dave, just to clarify, we're not going to be voting on this first reading without going into closed session. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, as it stands now, I think staff has put it forth initially as that we would be voting on it. The city attorney, as you just heard, had some concerns about that. I have some as well, because clearly we are going into a closed session for a purpose, and that may influence our decision to vote to go forward. So my thought is that we should not go forward at this time and push this off for another day. But I guess ultimately that's council's decision.
So I will say that is my feeling as well. I'm not comfortable voting on this until I've got all the answers to all of my questions, which apparently can't be accomplished unless we go into closed session.
Mr. Snyder?
Sure. Just a quick review, and I agree with Councilmember Lichtenhouse and you, Mayor, that we should table this or not vote on it, otherwise not vote on it tonight. Just a quick refreshing for folks. Real core questions. Why are we doing this? And what will it achieve? And what are the potential risks to the city?
So anyone want to take that? I presume that wasn't a rhetorical question.
So,
No.
so I think that creation of the CDA was something that was requested by the developer in order to help pay some of these upfront costs of the infrastructure that they will need to build before all their leases get started, because it's the infrastructure in common areas and that contributes to the entire development. And so it's a financing mechanism that it was agreed in the comprehensive agreement, and then in the amended comprehensive agreement that the manager would recommend to council to assist the developer with the financing of this project. So I think the risks are something we will need to be talking about in closed session, and we can have a clear discussion of that. And then perhaps when this comes before you again, we can talk further about those things. But I think it would be good for council to have a complete understanding in the closed session about that. But the risks are designed to be somewhat limited. The city is not requested at this time to have a general obligation backstop to the bonds or a subject to appropriation backstop. And so so the city risk, I think, is going to be as little as possible, but there are always risks that things could go wrong, of course.
Right.
To clarify what's in the comprehensive agreement, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead, Mr. Mayor. I have one other follow-up question, but you're asking follow-up question I was going to make. So go ahead.
So does the comprehensive agreement require the city or city council to agree to this? Or what specifically does the comprehensive agreement require?
The comprehensive agreement requires that the city manager recommend and support this to council. Because it's a legislative action, we advise the applicant or the developer that the city council could not be bound to take a legislative action. And so it does not bind you to take this action. I think that, this is an important part of the financing plan for the project. That is one thing to keep in mind, but you are not bound to approve this.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Sure. And one other question. Is this a way to finance infrastructure that would ordinarily be paid for by the developer or ordinarily paid for by a municipality in a similar circumstance?
I think that it's hard to answer. Most of the improvements are not, or most of the infrastructure is sort of the general to the site, and we have a big site with a lot of individual developments on it. So in an ordinary case in the city, we don't have many developments that are this size, and most developers build their project and they connect into some infrastructure, but do not provide it sort of wholesale for a huge area like this. So I don't know if Wyatt has any thoughts on this, but to me, it's not something we could say that we ordinarily do this type of infrastructure, because we don't ordinarily have a project of this size that involves so many buildings and so much area that is not already built out with infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that's correct. The infrastructure costs for this project are extraordinary, and this CDA will cover a portion of them. I think actually a relatively small portion of them, when you consider that an entire new road network needs to be built on essentially a greenfield, or call it a brownfield site, where there is no infrastructure interior to the site. So that's the extraordinary circumstance. And that's why I think the developer from the beginning has requested that a community development authority be part of their their capital stack, as it were, for being able to accomplish the project.
Just to follow, of course, it's where I'm going is it correct to say that in the absence of this, the city would likely be providing this infrastructure, but it might have to come from grants and taxes, so that this is a way to provide for infrastructure to support this development without having to call on additional tax revenue and to look for additional grants that we might otherwise look for funding for other infrastructure in other parts of the city. Is that a correct way to express it?
I think that's a good way to put it, in that this public infrastructure is being built, but in a way that the rest of the city's taxpayers do not need to pay for. It is really just the taxpayers within the boundaries of this project that will pay for these costs.
Right. And finally, this doesn't imply a reduction in other tax revenues from this site.
That is correct. This is not a tax increment financing where a portion of the taxes that would come to the city instead are being redirected to pay for infrastructure, and that would be like a tax increment financed structure. That's not what this is. This is a special assessment that would be on top of the regular taxes, and so I think that's an important point that you've made.
Okay, thanks very much. Mr. Mayor, thanks for allowing me to make these points. I just wanted to get the big picture out for folks to in the public to understand. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. So unless there are any other comments or questions from council, why don't we take the rest of this conversation, the conversation that is of legal advice and a privilege and the like that's not appropriate for an open session. We will have that conversation in a closed session. Any other comments or questions that are of a public nature that are not legal advice or otherwise privileged should be made now, as those comments can't be made in closed session. So if anyone else has anything of a open session nature, you should make that comment now. Otherwise, the rest of our conversation will be in closed session and be of a confidential legal advice nature. Let's go on then to just some wrap-up conversation before we go into closed session. Is there any business not on the agenda that anyone would like to discuss? Any standing regional committees or any council member comments in general? All right, so what I'm going to suggest now then is we go ahead into closed session. I'm going to read a motion, and then let's have a short period of time to ensure that the public is no longer on this conversation. When we're done with our closed session, we will briefly come out of closed session. I don't imagine there'll be any substantive conversation at all when we come back out into open session for members of the public, but we'll briefly come out of closed session and make a certification and take a vote on camera. So unless there's anything else, I'm going to go ahead and read a motion. The time is 9:24. Upon a motion by council member Hiscott, seconded by council member Hardy, and passed by a vote of city council, council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Legal advice regarding a request to create a community development authority and a request to approve the development at the West Falls Church Economic Development Project. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yeah.
Hiscott?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Tarter, yep. All right, so let's take a 5-minute break and let the cameras come down, ensure that we only have the right folks on the closed session. We'll reconvene at 9:30 in closed session. And for members of the public, we will come out briefly, but no substantive matters, I believe, will be discussed, given that those have already been part of our agenda. So we'll reconvene at 9:30 in closed session.
Mayor, TV and video and audio is on. If you would just give me 20 seconds so that live stream catches up. Okay, Mayor, you can proceed to motions.
All right, we're coming out of closed session now. We're going to do a motion to come out of closed session and then a certification. And so let's get started. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Duncan.
And seconded by Council Member
Litgenhouse.
And passed by vote of City Council reconvened in open session. Council Member Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse.
Yes.
Iscott.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
Tarter. Yep. All right. It is 10:58. This is our certification. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Snyder.
and seconded by Council Member
Hardy.
Scott.
Hardy, and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in session and open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the body. Vice Mayor Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse.
Yeah.
Iscott.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
Tarter. Yep. All right. Anything else anybody wants to discuss this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Mr. Snyder?
Mr.
Mr.
Mayor,
Snyder?
I just want to put on the record my thanks to Wyatt and the city attorney and all the staff. Yet another late night in which staff has done a great job in all that they're doing. So I just wanted to put that on the record and thank them, as well as thanks to the colleagues on council.
All right. Well, thank you, and certainly well deserved and well said. Anything else anybody wants to say before we adjourn? All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
Yes, we do at 11 o'clock.
All right. Let's do it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's have a great evening, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay
Bye.
safe.
Thank you. Bye, Cindy.